All right, I've got 7 o'clock. So I'll call the meeting to order. First up, public hearing 7 p.m. This is notice of intent and S&P for 250 Turnpike Road. In accordance with the provisions of the Southfield Stormwater Erosion Control Bylaw, Southfield General Bylaw, Chapter 154, Wetlands Protection Act, Mass General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Southfield Wetlands Bylaw, the Southfield Conservation Commission will conduct a continued public hearing on Thursday, October 26, 2023 at 7 p.m. via virtual Zoom meeting. The commission will consider a notice of intent and stormwater management permit for the project located 250 Turnpike Road, map 27, lots 2A and 46. The project description is a construction of a contractor's yard building, addition of driveway, access, and maintenance of previously existing stormwater areas. So we're going to continue this until next meeting, which is the 16th of November, while our consultants have a chance to review the recent submittals. Any questions? All right, do I hear a motion to continue to the meeting of November 16th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Barrington,
Yes.
Upton,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Pasamato.
Yes. Okay. Well, we're waiting for the next public hearing time to arrive. We can look at approving the minutes of October 5th, 2023. Do we have a quorum to do that?
No,
Yeah, we don't, do we?
nope, because it was Ben
Okay.
and Kevin and Liz.
All right, so we'll table that till next meeting, and hopefully we'll have a quorum. Okay, we got 8 minutes till the next meeting, so what do you think? Melissa?
We can do, so Chestnut Hill, I think, is coming at 7:30. We can do the extension for 11B Bigelow. So I didn't be able to make
Well,
contact
Chestnut
with.
Hill will happen when it happens, right?
Yes, yeah, no, but I told them, originally we thought we're gonna have all these public hearings, so when they show up, I'll let you know.
Now we'll see if we're still here.
Yeah. So for 11B Bigelow, I didn't make contact with the homeowner, but it sounds like most of the work is done, or the work is done. They're just waiting for their consultant to do what they need to do in terms of as-built and COC request materials. But since I didn't make contact with him, just to double confirm, I am requesting you guys approve the 1 year extension. And worst case scenario, if all the work is done and it's not needed, if it's okay with the commission, I just won't have him record that, and we'll just wait, the next month or two for that COC request to come in without kind of a penalty of the late expired COC fee or order fee.
All right, so we're looking for a 1 year extension.
Yes.
Okay, any questions?
No.
All right, do I hear a motion to issue a 1 year extension for 11B Bigelow Hill Road, DEP number 290-1064?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, you got it.
All in favor?
Farrington,
Yes.
Upton,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Pasamato.
Yes.
I was writing my notes and it came out.
Okay. Let's see, 38 Presidential?
Yes, so after the last meeting, I met with the homeowner and went over, they had picked out kind of a smaller number of plantings and I think the commission would consider. So I discussed with them some possibilities. I know they were concerned about costs. So one thing I did put out to them is the possibility of joining the Open Space Preservation Commission's Winter Sow project, which in February and March, the Open Space Committee releases a native seeds. You can sign up and get them, and then they do the webinar or the seminar of how to do the winter sow method. So these plantings would be smaller, but you would get a lot more seedlings and be able to cover a lot more area. And the biodiversity might be much larger than they would be able to get if they were buying from a nursery. So they're kind of considering that if that's an option that the commission would be open to. They also talked about submitting an application because they want to put in a play structure, and there's just some of those deeper spots near the edge where they had previously filled that are, you know, a little bit of an ankle breaker. So they're looking just to fill some of that in with sand just to make it a little bit more level. So as extra mitigation, you know, on top of the violation from the clearing, they would be whether they give back a portion of the site like we had talked about to allow to revegetate. So they are working on the RDA application, and it seemed prudent to kind of put the mitigation for both within the application to have one kind of consistent plan. So we're not going back and forth on which is accurate. So they are working on that. I wish I had something kind of more to put in front of you, but they're kind of mulling things a little bit over and what exactly they want to do. So there should be a application coming in the next couple meetings.
Okay. Anybody have any questions, comments?
I'd only say I participated in the winter sow the past 3 years, and I don't always have great success. It's very mixed. But there are a lot of people who will trade seedlings when they've had successful ones. So they could probably find a nice community to help them. Because everybody gets something to grow. It just may not be exactly what they wanted.
Yep. That's a good point.
I guess if they don't have as much success as they hope, you know, we're rapidly approaching the end of the time where they want to plant anything anyhow. So if things don't work out early spring, there's plenty of time to get the appropriate plantings in, you know, well before summer begins.
Okay.
That's all I had. 38 main or 38 presidential.
Any action we need to take?
Nope.
Okay. Let's see, I guess restrictive covenant 84 Main Street.
Yes, so they had sent over a preliminary plan, which is, if it's easiest, I can show that on the screen really quickly. So they have proposed additional area in this section here to add on to the restricted zone of the restrictive covenant. When I did make the comments to them about, you know, ensuring that this truly does encompass all of the features and structures that are in this area, but they wanted to send this to the commission now to make sure the general area was appropriate and acceptable. I believe it's a 2.75, 1 to 2.75 ratio abouts from the encroachment of here to the additional area they'd be given back. The one extra comment that I did make is just dependent on where the gazebo is that's on the property somewhere up here, ensuring that that is or is not within the area, and that's included in the square footage measurements. So they're gonna finish compiling. They're also working on that as-built that we requested, but first wanted to at least get this in front of the commission to show that they're making progress, and just wanted to kind of confirm the general area if that was okay.
Yeah, so it's contiguous with what's already the restricted zone
Correct.
at the northern end.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions, comments from anyone?
Trying to figure out what they did at the bottom there, with the transformer and stuff, because the line kind of drifts off. Is that still in the restricted zone, and we'll just approve it, or are they moving the line? It looked like they moved the line next to the generator building. Yeah, I don't know what they did. It's truthful.
One thing that's confusing is the line style they use for the property line is very
Yeah.
similar to the line used for the edge of pavement. And it's,
Yes, so Kevin, I think this is what they're showing as the edge of pavement. So they're stating that this is the original encroachment area of 470 square feet, and then this is the new encroachment area of 240. Although they don't include this.
Yeah.
I didn't notice
I
that.
was wondering whether they were proposing moving that line, but it sounds like they're not.
No, they're not. Yeah, because I think our initial conversations was we wanted to keep the restricted zone in its place and add additionally. So I will, no, I didn't even notice that they didn't include this. So I will bring that back to their attention as well.
Well, thanks. I'm less confused now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm more confused.
yeah, and so that clearly doesn't include the bridge or the gazebo. I think when you kind of do the math.
Yeah, and they don't
Yeah,
have
yeah, so it doesn't
transformer
include
either.
the bridge or the gazebo, which I think are also they've said a 2.5 to 1 ratio. I think when you include the bridge and the gazebo, it's less than 2.5 to 1. I think they're certainly on the right track. And Melissa, as you said, you know, they have to add these structures on here onto the plan that ultimately gets recorded, I would suggest.
Yeah. All right, so I will bring back to them to double confirm they need to continue to put other structures on here. I will double check about this transformer right here because it doesn't seem to be included in that encroachment area, but it is within that restrictive covenant because that would also add at least 150 or so square feet. So
Yeah.
okay.
All right, good catch. All right, so you'll feed that back to them, Melissa?
Sure will. Yes.
Okay. All right, what happened to my So next up is 7:10 public hearing. Stormwater management permit, 0 Marlborough Road. This is in accordance with the provisions of the Southfield Stormwater Erosion Control Bylaw, Southfield General Bylaw, Chapter 154. Southfield Conservation Commission will hold a continued public hearing on Thursday, October 26, 2023 at 7:10 p.m. via virtual Zoom meeting. The commission will consider a stormwater management permit for a project located at 0 Marlborough Road, maps 53 and 54, lots 9 and 8. The project description is the redevelopment of an existing parking area of St. Mark's School to coincide with the new roadway layout and town improvements of St. Mark's Street. And they've asked for a continuance.
Yes, and just as a quick update, they did, after our last meeting, take some of the comments of the commission and added in some bioretention. So they kind of beefed up some of their infiltration. So that has been sent to Fuss and O'Neill, and we'll have that by the November 16th meeting.
Okay. Any questions or comments from anyone?
Yeah.
All right, hearing none, do I hear a motion to continue to the meeting of November 16th?
So moved.
For a
Second,
second?
second,
All in favor?
Harrington,
Yes.
Upton,
yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Pasamato.
Yes.
Ben, Mark, oh my gosh, my brain. I do see the trustees here. Just FYI.
Okay. Do you want to take care of review of the standard conditions for the OLC and S&Ps? Before we
Sure.
get to the next public hearing?
Um, So I had just put a couple, I went through a lot of the surrounding towns, and a lot of them are very consistent with what we have in terms of their standard special conditions. A lot of towns have more kind of commercial and industrial that they have included in the list, at least that they gave me, whether they gave me a draft of a specific project. Sometimes it looked like it, others looked more of just their basic draft. So I pulled out a couple that seemed more appropriate just for our standard special conditions to think about. It's not something we have to decide tonight, but if there's some that you like the idea of, I can kind of start to draft what our kind of new special conditions would look like. And those were kind of the size and height restrictions on soil stockpiles, a clause about the change of land ownership during a time that a permit is open. So a lot of times, especially during new construction, a builder gets the permit and the new homeowners, will be the ones that ultimately own the property by the time we close it out. It's something that I used to do in my previous community. Kind of like an owner acknowledgement form that just has the owner sign a general statement that they've kind of read their order of conditions and they understand that they do have restrictions on their property. We talked about this at the MBTA one about the plastic netting. So kind of having a condition in there about erosion controls not consisting of plastic netting or backing. One that was a little more intense, but maybe something that we can consider on a site-by-site basis if it's needed, was putting something on the deed that states there are wetland resource areas and or buffer zones. Designation of a concrete washout area. That's kind of one of the small things that a lot of small projects, don't quite think about, but once they get to the site, there's kind of small concrete washouts everywhere. Foundation
Can you elaborate
drains.
on what that is? Is that like if somebody's pouring concrete and they're washing out the truck?
Yeah.
Is that what that is? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's just, the little leftover piles that half the time they just leave there and they're just kind of scattered throughout the
Oh,
site.
okay. I thought you were
Yeah.
talking about some kind of a concrete apron or something for some
Yeah.
sort of, discharge of water.
No, just kind of designating, one spot where if they need to put a pile of concrete washout, then that's where it goes. And it's, out or as far away from the resource area as possible.
I think they should take
Um,
it with them.
They should. They should. Not all of them do, but I know a lot of them.
No.
Yeah, they
I
just.
mean, I've been left with a pile or two before. I have no idea what to do with the thing.
They just like a free for all sometimes.
You better if they put a rope in it, you could use it for something.
Battering ram.
I don't know, hold your boat to the dock or something. I don't know. Just something that instead of a pile of concrete. Anyways, I digress.
Let's see. Foundation drains shall not daylight within 25 feet of any wetland resource area. That's something that I found aren't always on submitted plans, is where the foundation drain is going. I know a lot of engineers are getting better at putting them in, but it's usually something that we see kind of after the fact, that is required by building code. But it's not something that we maybe automatically think about.
We don't have that one already?
I don't think so. I'm not the one I was comparing. I'll double
Oh.
check.
That one sounded familiar when I read through them.
I'll double check. But not when I was comparing, but I could have missed it.
It might have been 20 feet though, based on our bylaw.
Yeah. That would make sense. And then just kind of what we already do, but more kind of consistent requirements to place permanent bounds. Some cities and towns have it on almost every permit, and they actually have, a contract with some vendor that you can buy these concrete bounds, through the town. So they're all the same. They have the appropriate language, which for some of our projects is a little intense, but something to think about in the future if we want more kind of consistency with what we're requiring for those boundary markers. That's kind of what the basics that I pulled out. A lot of them had some great examples for like construction monitoring and their replication requirements, but not especially for what we've seen recently in our permits. We don't really get a lot of resource area impact projects, especially recently, and for the most part, we have kind of residential, smaller projects. So we're not getting into those heavy industrial uses. But they're good examples for if we ever need to look at them, they'll be available for us to ponder on. So I don't know if anyone saw any others as they were going through the ones that I uploaded, but.
Any discussion?
None right now, but I definitely would like a little more time to go through in greater detail myself.
I agree with that too. I feel like I need a little bit more time with them.
Well, we have a
Sure.
public hearing right now, so you have to decide now. Only kidding.
Decide not to decide.
That's fine. Yeah. All right. Well, Melissa, thanks for digging that up and going through all that. That's awesome. Very
No
helpful.
problem.
All right, 7:20. So the next is a public hearing for abbreviated notice of resource area delineation, 20 Sears Road. In accordance with the Wetlands Protection Act, Mass General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Southwood Wetlands Bylaw, the Southwood Conservation Commission will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, October 26, 2023 at 7:20 p.m. via virtual Zoom meeting. The commission will consider an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for project located at 20 Sears Road, map 64, lot 2, for the applicant William DePietri. The project description is confirmation of wetland boundaries.
So just as a, oh, go ahead, Nicole.
Sorry, my name is Nicole Hayes, wetland scientist with Goddard Consulting. We are here before you with an ANRAD to confirm wetland resources on the site. I've been out with the peer reviewer and we looked at all the flags. We did move a bunch of flags up gradient to encompass more wetland area. We are, as far as I know, we are all in agreement with the flags and the updated plan. And as a result, we asked for an ORAD. Thank you.
And then just some background and for recommendation for kind of the findings of this is that we found during this peer review process that a stream had kind of been culverted through a 12-inch pipe, and in a subsequent notice of intent, they are going to be submitting for daylighting that stream and construction of a new home. So this is just confirming the BVW flags with a finding that the final stream locations and borders of that jurisdictional area will be confirmed with the subsequent order of conditions and notice of intent.
Correct.
You're on mute, Mark. Sorry.
Sorry, I keep putting my papers down and hitting the space bar. When you say daylighting the stream, do you mean removing it from being piped?
Correct.
Not daylighting the outflow of it.
No.
Okay. De-piping it.
Deep
Correct.
piping.
Okay, got it.
Can I ask, is this just something that was done back in the mists of time? This isn't some recent thing that got snuck in, right? The pipe?
Joe, was it 2003-ish? I think we saw that change on
trying to remember
aerials.
let me see if I have that here handy.
So not in a huge distant past, at least.
Okay. Something that should have been permitted by the
Correct.
prior owner, but it's going to be set to rights as part of the
Yes.
future filing. Okay, thank you.
Yes, around 2006, based on aerial photos. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Joe, do you have any other comments?
no, I
good.
reviewed the plans. Looks like all the changes were made. I think the delineation is appropriate.
Okay. So given all that, do I hear a motion to issue a abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for this property?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Barrington,
Yes.
Upton,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Passamato.
Yes.
All right, Nicole, I should probably get this to you tomorrow morning.
All right,
Have
thank you very much.
a good evening.
You too.
Okay, let's see if we have Chestnut Hill here. We can entertain them now.
Promoting them up.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Melissa, do you want to do the management plan first and then just roll right into the nesting birds, or?
Sure. Yeah, let's do management plan first, I think.
All right. So before I do that, I wanted to reintroduce for those of you who have met Julie and introduce for those of you who have not met Julie. Julie Richberg is my colleague. She is a PhD ecologist and is responsible for all of the great work behind the nesting bird studies that we did. I know that some of you have met Julie. Alejandro Brambilla, who also works with Julie, who some of you have met also at Chestnut Hill Farm, his wife had a baby last Thursday, so he's out on paternity leave. So Julie is shouldering the load of this meeting on her own. So I just wanted to be sure everybody knew who Julie was. So we have submitted the 2023 CR overall management plan. I think everyone has seen that. It's incorporated all of the edits and information that you all have required. We are ready to go ahead and sign that if you are, and put that part of the program to bed. And certainly we're here to answer any questions that you might have that might be remaining.
Mark, may I?
Yes, sorry, I lost my mouse.
Oh.
I have 3 screens and I couldn't find it. I'm sorry.
All right, yeah, so I took the time to go through the management plan. It's been a while since we've discussed it here. There are a couple of things that I know we had discussed before that I was hoping to see. The first one was, you know, at the end of the day, this is in large part a farm management plan, and we had talked before about just providing some sort of outer bounds or outer limits for, you know, what's the possible size of the various farming operations during this 5-year span. And I think I, you know, was suggesting that this doesn't need to be in any way restrictive to the trustees, just sort of setting sort of the outer limits. You know, we'll be maintaining on that property, you know, a herd of sheep that won't exceed, you know, 50 sheep or something, that allows you to you know, fulfill your plans for the property for the next 5 years, and gives users of the management plan and readers of the management plan some sort of idea of the scope of possible farming activities over the next 5 years. That was the first one. The second one, the language about trail closures, I think could just use a little bit of fine tuning just to get it in line with the conservation restriction. I think the real meat of the issue is that you know, in an emergent situation, the grantor, the property owner, the trustees can shut down the trails for up to 72 hours. And that beyond that, trail closures require the approval of both grantor and grantee. And I think it would be helpful to have the language be the same, just to eliminate confusion, the same, you know, to be very similar between the CR and the management plan. I understand and agree with the plan to have one master plan that, a management plan that incorporates farm management plan, forestry plan, and so forth. So you're not updating the forestry plan. I understand there aren't plans to perform any forestry. The language was not completely decisive. There shall be no forestry operations during the next 5 years. It seemed to possibly leave a little bit of a window. And I guess I would just say that I think it would add some comfort that, if the grantor elects to, perform forestry operations during the term of this management plan, that a forestry plan will be, provided to the Conservation Commission prior to any forestry activities. Or if you're comfortable saying no forestry activity is going to take place, I think that eliminates the entire issue. But I think one way or the other. And then finally, with all the craziness that happened over the last several years, of course, we're not exactly on the 5-year schedule anymore with the management plan, which is fine. And I think we all understand the reasons for that. The prior management plan had a continuity clause, and I don't believe that this one does, but just something saying that in the event, hopefully the stars won't align in this particular way again, but in the event that the management plan isn't updated in 5 years, that this current management plan will remain in effect until the adoption of a new one, just to get it in words that that's how we preserve the continuity of this.
Ben, I think that is on the bottom of page 9.
Did I miss it? Okay, it's entirely possible I missed it. If it is there, then great.
Yeah, it says, so the overall management plan will be updated every 5 years. The current management plan shall stay in effect until an updated plan is approved by the Conservation Commission.
Okay. And have we gotten the comment letter yet from Open Space?
We have not, no. I'm not sure what
I
comments.
understand they had a meeting on Tuesday, is that right? I think they were hoping to have a meeting on Tuesday to discuss the management plan. I just didn't know if we've gotten their comments yet.
I'm not.
Those are my comments on the management plan.
Would you like me to respond, or do you want to wait to go around, or how do you want to do this?
We also lost Mark.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess, do other folks, I'll just, until Mark comes back, I'll step in as chair. Do anybody else have comments, questions, concerns that they'd like to bring up?
I just had one question I just wanted to hear a little bit more about in reading through the document, because I'm fairly new to the committee. I noticed a section on hunting, and just wondered if that is a practice that's commonly used in other properties, and what we might expect as a Conservation Commission related to hunting on this land.
And is there anybody else that has a question that they'd like DA to respond to? Kevin.
Yeah, so I pulled up the old one from a while ago and kind of compared it to this one. It looks like the interpretive signs is new. Could you explain what you're thinking there? And then the other one that kind of jumped out at me was that the rotational grazing, you're going to experiment somewhere else. And I think before you incorporate that at Chestnut Hill, I think the commission, I'd like the commission to have a say on that. Rather, I think right now it's kind of written up as you'll present something and then go ahead, and I'd rather have us a little stronger language that we might need to approve that.
Okay. I think that DA, before we just completely overburden you with stuff here, I think that'd be a good place for us to sort of draw a line into this, and we can go through this stuff, and then any further questions that arise, we can talk about further on.
Okay, I can address some of these. Some of these I'm going to have to get back to you on. the outer limits in terms of farming on the property. Just to clarify, Ben, are you only referring to livestock, or are you also referring to vegetable and flower production?
So.
The reason
yeah,
I ask is that we've never done that before.
Okay,
And I know that our farm team is reticent to do that, just because of all sorts of things like soil condition and breeding and
sure.
all of the things that go into farming. It's very hard to predict 5 years out. We've talked about this before, and
Yeah.
and they really are they're worried about that, to be frank.
Okay, so, and that's with regard to, the planting of vegetables and flowers, and that's a particular concern? Do I understand
That's a
that?
concern, and so is the breeding, because we have lamb there now.
Yeah,
We have sheep on the property. We, 3 years from now, I'm making this up, that it may be, more cattle. I mean, we just don't,
Yeah.
we don't know at this point. So I think it's hard for them to, to put parameters around that. I can certainly ask again.
yeah. Again, so this isn't intended to be, burdensome to the trustees to shoehorn yourself into, a box that's gonna later prove, uncomfortable for you. And I'm certain we could, if necessary, work in some sort of language that, if these bounds are going to be exceeded or something like that, we discuss it together or something like that in the future. But I think done correctly, that isn't something simply that would come up. I think there are some sort of rational outer bounds that would give the trustees plenty of breathing room. I saw in the management plan, there was, you mentioned bringing cattle, and there's, that's listed as a potential something happening in the future. Again, with planting activities, not talking about, we're going to be planting, exactly 2.5 acres of vegetables in field C, planting activities may occur within the following areas during the course of the next 5 years. And any area that might reasonably be planted would be listed there. Does that make sense? In other words, that this isn't to, to construct a barrier for the trustees. It's to give some, a level of comfort to, users of the property for passive recreation and people looking at the management plan. But again, not to be constrictive.
Right. I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure, did you look at
More-
towards the end, the farm conservation plan?
That was the next thing I was going to mention, because you were talking about a farm plan, and there is a farm plan attached here. It's pretty in depth.
So on page 42 of the PDF, if that helps at all. So they have the section on livestock, and it talks about how right now they have sheep, they can do cattle, they kind of have, and then they have a breakdown of specific areas and pastures, what they use for field crop, what's grazing and ground nesting, etc., with kind of a rough acreage, and then a map that outlines that as well.
So what it does not have, to your point, Ben, is future sort of restrictions on that, but it's pretty specific on it.
Okay.
It's called Appendix E.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Sorry,
No problem.
is it possible I'm looking at, oh, come on now.
It should be 9/12/23
Yeah.
CHF overall.
23. Sorry. Here we go. No wonder I was confused. My apologies. Page 42. I'll just make sure that I'm recalling the correct. There we are. Okay. Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. So the field use and location looks fantastic. I would say in particular, a concern that's been raised to me. There was a period of time where there was, there were quite a few goats and sheep on the property at the same time that I think just because it was unexpected was a little surprising to folks, as well as the and this is obviously long since been resolved, but the issue with the pigs and so forth. And I think it would be helpful to have that discussed, and as I said, an outer limit described within the management plan.
Within the livestock and grasslands practices section of the farm plan?
I think that'd be certainly an appropriate place.
When you say outer limit, do you mean maximum number?
Yeah. That's, you were gone for a little bit. And so what I was saying, Mark, is, not a number so as to be restrictive and get in the way of the trustees' needs for their property, but to give the, the reviewer of this document and some of the users of the property, an idea of the sort of the possible maximum scope of things. I think both of those goals can be met. I would think it could be done, fairly easily without being burdensome, putting it together or living with it in the future. And I think it would provide some comfort to, like I said, users of the property and folks reviewing the management plan.
So not restrictive, but descriptive limits.
Exactly.
Any other thoughts on that before we move to Ben's next point? So the trail closures, we can type the language on that. That's no problem. The forestry plan. When last we talked, you did ask for a forestry plan, and that actually falls under Julie's purview. So we know that a forestry plan is due, and we are submitting that to you. And I had correspondence with Melissa about that. So,
oh, my apologies. I'm not sure where I got that from. I thought I had read that there isn't an intent to engage in forestry practices.
There's not, but the CR requires a forestry plan.
Okay.
So that's why we're doing one.
Understood. So that answers that whole question. Thank you.
So does a forestry plan include inventory and healthy thinning, or what's it entail?
Julie, do you mind answering that?
Yeah, I said
mean, a forestry plan can be very broad, right? And include all sorts of management practices. Management practices range from doing nothing, right, to addressing, disease, or if trees are hit with emerald ash borer, hemlock woolly adelgid, beech leaf disease. All these diseases is their way to do it, all the way up to production forestry, where they're looking for a product coming off. And so a forestry plan is actually outlining, kind of based on the landowner's intent and their values, how to manage the forest. And so I haven't had a chance to review the existing forestry management plan from the past. But where we've worked on forest plans within other trustees' properties, we're kind of looking at how can we manage forests to increase health and resiliency under the face of climate change. And again, those options range from doing nothing to doing some active forestry, and it's going to be kind of a range And I can't tell you right now what that's gonna include for Chestnut Hill Farm, because I haven't had a chance to really delve into it yet. But that's what we'll be looking at. And some of that may include inventory, and getting an assessment of what's out there currently. Some of it may be just relying on past inventory. Like I said, I have to review the plan and make decisions at that point.
Is it typically done by a licensed forester?
So a forestry plan can be done by a licensed forester. Again, it depends on the scale and scope. Of course, if there was any harvesting that was going to be done, then that falls under Chapter 132, and that's done by a licensed forester to actually come up with that more detailed plans. But kind of the larger, broader plan, again, I have to look and see what's been done in the past and whether we want to engage a licensed forester to help us update the plan, or if it's something that we feel confident to update ourselves.
Okay. Thank you.
I also don't know the conditions for the conservation restriction, if that's requiring a licensed forester to sign off or not.
Yeah, I only ask because I'm very familiar with forestry and some trees based on some property I own in New York State. And we have a program that we belong to, and we have a licensed forester come in. They do inventory, they do periodic thinning. There's a lot of details and you know, I'll call it pomp and circumstance around that.
Yeah, we have some in Massachusetts. We have different programs that a property owner can be enrolled in. Some will require active forest management to stay within that program. And there are certain tax benefits to those different programs. So
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
It kind of depends on the scale and what we're doing and what we're trying to fall under.
Okay. Thank you.
The next question was about hunting on the land. And we do not do hunting on the land unless there is a predator that is, you know, potentially could cause harm to a person or to crops or to an animal. And since I've been with the trustees, I believe we've one time contacted the Conservation Commission to let them know that it was there was a rabid coyote on the property, and we received permission to remove the coyote.
The helpful clarification, just where I saw predator and pest control, I didn't know quite how you classified that. So it's a helpful explanation.
Good. Kevin, you asked about interpretive signs. So an interpretive sign is something that is used to explain something that is occurring at the property. So there is, we use them at some of our other properties where, for example, if we're doing, we actually used one when we were building the Deerfoot barn. So we explained what was happening and where the barn was coming from and what the process was in building that. We then took it down once the Deerfoot barn was up. But there may be a time if we're doing, we might want to put something up that talks about the work that we're doing with the bobolinks, or we have designation as a monarch way station. We have something small that explains that in the children's area. So they're basically they're just interesting signs that share information about the property and interpret for the person who's reading them what they're seeing around them. We certainly don't envision having signs all over the place. That's totally counter to how we address that.
Okay.
And Kevin, I think that language, if not exactly in terms of the size and upon mutual agreement, is in the CR. So that's kind of just taken and posted.
Okay.
And then you also asked about rotational grazing.
Yes, in the pasture management, it said, you know, you can come back and do a presentation and then go ahead and implement the grazing that you've been experimenting with at other sites. And I think the commission would want, well, I would want control over it. I don't know about the other commissioners, but Yeah, just the language there was like, it says upon presentation of findings, the trustees may incorporate this approach at Chestnut Hill Farm.
So that is referring to the work that we've been doing this summer with the nesting birds and the information. We're going to share some of that with you. That's one level of rotational grazing. The other is that we don't keep animals on one piece of land for a long period of time because there's not enough there for them to graze and it's not good for the land. So rotational grazing is a practice where you are moving animals throughout the property for grazing, but only in those areas that are designated for grazing. And we also do, in the trustees, we will often move animals from property to property to take advantage of, you know, whatever is available at that particular property. We haven't had to do that animal movement this year because we've had so much rain and everything's been so, you know, robust that the animals have been fine where they are.
Yeah, it's really the trial agroecological approach that you know, before that gets implemented at Chestnut Hill Farm, I think the commission, I hope the commission would want to be involved in that decision. Yeah.
We can write that in, just you all have to tell us what you want us to do.
I guess I would, you know, specifically with reference to the bobolinks, yeah, you know, I'd had a conversation several months ago with Whit Beals. I'm going to say this was back in May, and just about his recollections from his earliest days at the farm about the number of bobolinks and you know, it was also interesting to hear just how beloved they were, you know, by his family, and you know, they considered them a part of the farm and so forth. And his, you know, his estimates of historically the number of nesting pairs that would be there some years. You know, we've had a setback with them. It sounds like some rebounding is taking place, which is fantastic and great news. I share Kevin's concern that if there's going to be a change in grazing practices, you know, I'm worried about any risk to the bobolinks. You know, as it reads in the management plan, it sort of coincides with my recollection of discussions before that on other sites, these agroecological methods were being tested on other sites that are home to bobolinks to see how they work. And once data from these trials is available, then we would speak together to talk about implementation here on Chestnut Hill. And just, I'm kind of jumping ahead of things here, but in reading the study that'll be the topic of our next discussion here, it sounded like it felt to me a little bit like we're jumping the gun and doing some trialing of grazing strategies here, and it feels to me that with the bobolinks, particularly in kind of a tenuous situation, that we may be jumping the gun, and you know, before the data is in from these other sites where it sounded like some trials were underway. My recollection beastly be faulty there, but that's how I recall it.
Would you like us to go through the work that's been done and talk about that a little bit so you have a sense of that, and then come back to this? Or do you, how do you want to, because we're sort of crossing.
Yeah, like I said, I did kind of jump ahead there. I think
no, that's okay.
No, I do, and I think it would be helpful to talk about it, because if other commissioners, of course, have other questions or whatever regarding the management plan itself, but I think this question in particular does tie into our next topic. I think it's sort of a natural thing to combine the two. If everyone else is ready to move along, I don't want to get in the way of anyone else's discussion, though.
So I will say that we met with Whit, obviously, throughout the summer, and he was very aware of the work that we were doing. And was a really good partner on this front. And so I just want to be sure everybody is aware of that. Certainly after the time that we had met, Ben, when was that, early May?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Julie, do you want to sort of take us through the report, and then we can talk a little bit more about the questions that the commissioners have?
Sure, that sounds fantastic. So around the management of the bobolink field, or the main field, that 10 acres, kind of central 10 acres. And as DA mentioned, most of this work was done by Alejandro and his seasonals, collecting the data and analyzing the data. So I'm kind of standing in for him, but I have worked closely with him on this as well. So after some of these issues were raised, we kind of came up with a plan for this past year, where we were going to do some more in-depth monitoring of the bobolinks and other grassland birds as well, savanna sparrows, grasshopper sparrows. And then we were going to measure really intensively grass productivity, because that was another concern, that the grass was being impacted by the amount of grazing, so that we could get some real kind of data points. Whereas in the past period of time before this past year, we haven't been able to do kind of that intensive of grazing, of measurement of what's happening out there. And then we were looking at the grassland, that 10 acres, we were hoping to be able to divide that into kind of 3 areas, and have one area be kind of no grazing, nothing done from January basically through July 15th, right? Through the traditional grassland nesting bird season. The other was, another third was to be looked at to say, well, what happens if we get out there and we're able to graze in April, but we stop in May? You know, and that's really depends on the type of year we have. And then do no further grazing until after July 15th. The third section was to, okay, what happens if we might be able to do a little bit of grazing until May 15th, but then stop from May 15th to July 15th, because again, thinking about when bobolinks are setting up nests and territories. What ended up happening this year, we got great grassland bird observations. We measured the grass, but we never had the need to do any early grazing. So we didn't graze any of the field until after July 15th, after grassland bird nesting season was done. And then we've been able to do kind of for observations of bobolinks. You may have recall I was speaking about a volunteer grassland bird monitoring program that we were setting up. And I have a TerraCorps member, service member, who's been working with me. And she was able to recruit 3 volunteers to do, following our protocol, get out and monitor birds, grassland birds at Chestnut Hill Farm. Unfortunately, one of the volunteers dropped out, so we only had 2 that were actually gathering data, and we're able to get data points over the season by those 2 volunteers. They did kind of repeated at least 3 observations across the season. With those observations from the volunteers, we were finding, you know, on each visit, they were finding around 5 to 10 birds. Most of the time it was, you know, 5 to 8 males, not documenting females. So we know the females were there as well. So those numbers were higher than probably what was being recorded. In addition, Alejandro got out after doing some training with Dr. Noah Perlett, who does bobolink research and has been doing bobolink research for probably 20 years, and trained him on how to do some nest searching And so Alejandro was actually able to get out and locate 2 nests within the main bobolink field that he was able to follow, and actually document that the chicks hatched, and then which chicks looked like they were able to fledge. Just kind of to put in perspective, the volunteer program that we started this year, it's kind of was expanding on an existing program that we had. We coordinated over 70 volunteers across 26 properties and got over 2,000 observations statewide. So this is kind of a much bigger program statewide for the trustees, but we also, you know, Chestnut Hill Farm was part of that larger program. And then Alejandro collected data on the grass production, which of course was really good this year. And that's in the report. You can see that the bobolink field was kind of right in the middle of all the fields being grazed at Chestnut Hill Farm. And let's see, those are kind of the big results from this year. We also had, you know, bobolinks. We had observations of grasshopper sparrow, which usually aren't found in grasslands that are under about 100 acres. So the fact that they were showing up there was really fantastic and showing some of the quality of the grassland. We don't know if the grasshopper sparrows were nesting there, but we did observe them there several times over the course of the summer. Savannah sparrows are definitely nesting there, but we didn't capture, you know, we didn't find their nests. We didn't search for their nests. We were really having the volunteers focus in on the bobolinks. And then, so we were able to show on the map, on the monitoring report that we submitted, where the 2 confirmed nests were. There's believed to be at least 1 more nest that was out there, possibly 2. So we're having kind of even more production out there than we thought, following past years, you know, recent years, anecdotal evidence of what was happening out there, and really seeing a lot of use throughout the whole season. So there's more detail in the written report. I hope you all have had a chance to look at those and see the really cute pictures of baby bobolinks that Alejandro was able to capture. I'm happy to answer any other questions at this point.
I guess just a couple of observations. I appreciate the effort that was put into studying the grassland bird population out at Chestnut Hill Farm. It sounds like what's being proposed with dividing the field into thirds and trying a different approach on each third. That's something that in our prior discussions, I guess I envisioned as sort of along the lines of the studies that were discussed maybe taking place at other locations or were underway at other locations before being implemented here. You know, once the findings from those come back, then changes would be made at Chestnut Hill. So that's just my recollection. If it's faulty, though, please correct me. And then the final observation, I understand this was a unique year with the amount of rainfall. I think one observation is that not mowing until July 15th, it sounds like that may have been beneficial in quickly reestablishing beginning to reestablish this population of bobolinks. I get the impression hearing what happened that could well have played a role in it. My recollection is the early season grass height is important in making an area attractive to these meadow nesting species. They need to have some minimal amount of cover before they'll consider putting a nest in, and early grazing is sort of a risk to that. And it sounds like what happened this year, completely eliminated that risk. Again, my
Yeah, and sorry, I should have sorry. I forgot to mention about, our more intensive research project that is underway at Appleton Farm, and that is a much more intensive grazing, rotational grazing research project that we're starting with, right? Where we actually have animals in fields that support grassland birds when the grassland birds are there, right? So this is something that we decided, early on, we're not doing that at the scale at Chestnut Hill Farm. We really need it at a much larger field to do that. So when we're talking about, that grazing study, and anything that we learned from that grazing study, being able to bring it to some of our other properties, like Chestnut Hill Farm, that is not this third study that we're doing. That is a completely different and much higher intensity study that wouldn't have been suitable for Chestnut Hill Farm. So I think there's a little bit of confusion there.
Yeah.
Where, that information that we're going to gather from that project being done at Appleton Farms, we'll probably glean some learnings from that to bring to Chestnut Hill, but that's going to be, several years from now. That's not going to be what certainly wasn't this year, certainly is not going to be next year, because we're still working on that data, and really trying to find out how and when and how quickly to move cattle in particular. So as far as, not having the question of not mowing or grazing before the birds are arriving so that the grass is able to grow, both Alejandro and I were able to meet with WIT and talk about that in May, right? As we're looking at the residual and how quickly the grass has grown at that point compared to where it was not mowed or grazed, and compare those. And the grass height was very similar, whether it had been grazed by his steers or looking at that bobbling field and what was mowed. So that, I think that question of how much grass growth do we get, and what are the birds looking for when they arrive, is still, we're not seeing the differences that, it's not the difference between 6-inch tall grass and 2-inch tall grass by the time the birds are ready to set up territories. Birds will come and start setting up territories, as early as the first week of May, but they're really not going to be establishing nests for another couple of weeks, even until like May 20th. And so I think that was really interesting when Alejandro was able to actually document some of these nests to see, when the birds have actually established nests, and how tall the grass was then. And he has some of those production numbers. So I think we're learning a lot this year about what's happening within this bobolink field. Yes, it started raining in June and it never stopped, it seemed, but in May, it was pretty nice for a little while. And so, we had kind of normal conditions for a while in the spring as the birds were arriving. I think there are definitely more birds there this year than have been noticed in the past. I don't know if there are more birds there now, or we had more intensive observation to actually document and notice them. I think it's probably, it potentially could have been a little of both, but we don't really have that data. I think for next year, now we have that data, right? So we'll be able to look at numbers next year, compare it to grass height again, and really kind of get a better handle on what's happening as far as is the bird population increasing or staying the same, or decreasing there, if that makes sense.
It does, and thank you. I guess I share Kevin's concern that there seems to be, it feels to me a contradiction between what's in the management plan, and I'm looking at page 5, the second big paragraph there, talks about the trustees at a few select farms and fields across the state are trialing models of pasture management with rotational grazing using an agroecological approach. The trustees anticipate this approach may continue, et cetera, et cetera. Should this approach prove viable in trustees trials elsewhere based on documented breeding pairs and fledgling rates, the trustees may incorporate this approach at Chestnut Hill Farm. That part of the management plan feels to me contradictory with respect to the proposal in the Bobolink study, and I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think you know, when the Bobolink field has been left in that, you know, May 1st to July 15th leave alone phase, which is kind of standard operating for grassland birds. And so I think this was, okay, let's see what happens if we don't graze before May 1st, right? So the traditional operating is nothing May 1st to July 15th. And so it was kind of adding that little bit on to address some concerns, you know, some of Witt's observations.
Yes.
And then that little bit of following up from research that was done by Noah Perlott and saying, yeah, birds aren't in the fields nesting on the ground. They may be arriving and kind of setting up territories, but they're not doing anything in that May 1st to May 15th. And so that was, maybe we could try something on a limited scale there, but
yeah,
I hear you. And Chestnut Hill Farm is not our big experimental farm at this point, but we are collecting data to kind of monitor, and particularly around soil health and the grass height and the vegetation. And those are going to be really, really important to the birds, is how healthy are these fields. And that's, you know, the agroecological goal for all of our properties is to be able to manage soil health, forage health, and biodiversity using, in this case, livestock.
Thank you. Do we still have Mark?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I just
I'm here. Anything else that's on the hit list? No? Pretty much covered it all?
so
Okay. So, DA, next steps?
So next steps are, if I can read my chicken scratch, is that we'll check to see if we can add some sort of parameters for quantity of livestock. We will tighten up that language so it essentially just matches what's in the CR for the trail closures. Will that work for you, Ben?
yes, perfect.
Okay. And then Julie is working on the forestry plan, which is a separate document that we'll get to you when that's done. And I can't remember what we said that when that was going to be, sometime in January.
Yeah, we were looking at after the first of the year.
Yeah. We've addressed the question of the hunting, the interpretive signs. I think we had a good conversation on the grazing and the birds. I think and so we'll get those changes to you, and hopefully we can get this thing signed and put to bed.
Okay. That sounds good.
And once again, we so appreciate your really active interest in this and representing the interest of the people who live in Southborough, and it's always to the benefit of everyone who comes to the farm. So I know this is a big volunteer lift being on these commissions, and we're very appreciative because we partner with conservation commissions all over the state, as you can imagine, and it's very, very important work. So thank you.
Yeah, I took a drive down Chestnut Hill after it was newly paved.
Yeah.
And on one of the very rare sunny Saturdays, and there were a ton of people walking the trails, a ton of people.
Well,
So I don't know
and-
if the attraction was the beautiful day or the fact that Chestnut Hill was no longer a pothole mess, but maybe both.
Oh, well, Mark, I have to tell you, they chose to do the paving when we had summer camp going on. So the parents were not too happy about the paving. And the company that did it, they were great. They would try to sort of open up the road to let the drop off and the pickup occur, but sometimes it didn't happen. And then, you know, people were like driving it was crazy, but it is a much improved road. You're absolutely right. So,
Yeah. Well, paving is never done at a good time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening. All
Yep. You as well.
right. Thanks.
Good night. Okay, Melissa, next thing on my list is Park Central ZBA comments for 40B comprehensive permit.
Yes, so this is a draft that I had put together and I can share on the screen if this is easiest. And just quickly at the last meeting, you know, since we kind of bare bones, we kind of passed over it, and I just sent the ZBA a brief letter outlining kind of what our previous concerns had been, utilizing wetland resource areas to meet the stormwater standards, and just kind of noting that there are inconsistencies on the wetland flags. So I am going to share this. So it may or may not be 6 pages long, but it is just kind of the kind of basic overview of the plans that were submitted. You know, essentially the first couple comments are very administrative, you know, requesting extra time, suggesting that the ZBA use peer review, which I believe that they're going to utilize, and they're trying to start that process with the help of the town planner. And then kind of it starts getting into, when I looked at the boundary survey, which kind of served as the existing conditions plan, it didn't seem to show the updated wetland flags that we went through in the last filing of Park Central in 2018. So, you know, I was going to essentially attach those plans as an attachment A, but I did painstakingly go through and compare as much as I could flag per flag. And, you know, there was kind of some substantial differences. And it wasn't clear if all of those changes had been made onto the actual construction plans created by Bowler. You know, the application itself was kind of a little tricky to read and decipher. So they have both kind of a set of plans for the comprehensive permit and a set of plans for subdivision, since that's being done under this comprehensive permit process. And they were kind of the same, they were kind of different. Like some had some drainage information, the other plan set had other, you know, the rest of the drainage information, you know, some had wetland flags, some didn't. So it took a lot to kind of go back and forth. But kind of, you know, the majority of it was, there was some which they still had certain wetlands as notated as isolated, when in the latest go around, we did determine them to be bordering. You know, there were some wetlands that we found a connection to adjacent wetlands that they had not included, and just a kind of a series of changes to wetland flags. So I outlined them as best as I could. You know, it was almost every single wetland there was an issue, and even between the existing conditions plan and, again, the plans made for permitting, they did not match. So it was a lot. And And then some of even just on their cover pages, they didn't have the wetlands outlined, or kind of silly things that they didn't go through their checklist and double check. And then I did make the comment, which is something we have discussed kind of before, of if not already done, the wetland flags should be refreshed in the field, and they should first be refreshed by a surveyor. They shouldn't be just placed by the wetland scientist if they already have plans created. This will ensure that the wetland flags on the plans are in the correct location in the field if they were to be re-reviewed. So that's pretty important, just to make sure proper setbacks and things like that. I noticed
When you
there was a
say
lot.
if, you really mean when.
When.
Yeah.
And also, as a kind of a sidetrack on that, I know I've been talking with Laura a lot since she does ZBA stuff, and they are including wetlands in kind of the review of the comprehensive permit. So Concom is going to be very much heavily involved in this iteration of the project, just like every other board. So I think we'll have a nice smooth outcome on that process as well.
So comment. So if you scroll up,
Yep.
you've identified anomalies with flags in various bordering wetland series.
Yep.
Why wouldn't we just say they have to reflag the whole place?
I think they do. I think I was just caught. I could easily pull out the ones where they did not match between the various sets. So this is kind of separate from them having to reestablish flags.
But so what you did is great work. It's tedious work.
Mhm.
But I think it just justifies the need that they need a reflag.
Yes, I think they
Right?
still do. I think by
Like
calling.
these are the anomalies that you found,
Mhm.
which justifies the fact that they need to go in there 5, almost 6 years later and reflag.
Yep. I think and it's also just making sure that they're using the most updated reviewed flags, because some of these just seemed so old.
Yeah. The only thing I worry about getting really specific in what you've provided
Mhm.
is they'll make those changes and consider it done. Right? That,
Yep.
oh, I'll change this to that, I'll change this to that, and the commission's gonna be okay with that. And I don't think we want to deliver that message.
Okay.
That's my opinion of
No,
one
that
person.
makes sense. Okay. So I can get rid of them, and just state that they, should match, or they.
You could just say that in
Yeah.
going through the plans that you reviewed, there are a number of anomalies in a couple of examples, provide them a couple of examples, and it's just, backup information as to why they need to go back in there and collect as many ticks as they can while they flag it.
Yeah. I think at least calling out the ones that, they
And Joe
labeled
can't
as
wait to go in
isolated.
there and look at it all, so.
I know, I think Chris also has threatened Matt to pull him back on certain things, but Joe's our fresh eyes, which is nice.
No, I just worry that by calling these things out individually, that they'll make these small tweaks and changes and they think that they've met our requirements.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I can take those out. And what I would probably suggest calling out is at least the ones that we found to be bordering and not isolated, because that's pretty important, if that makes sense.
Yep.
All right. And the ones that kind of provide a bigger connection. So I'll take out the specifics of the wetland flags.
Yeah, and the previously hung flags don't really have any legal or regulatory
Yep.
status. We didn't issue any kind of an order, and even if we did, it's still 5 or 6 years ago. However they want to reestablish them, they still need to be professionally reviewed all over again as part of the new filing. I think Mark is onto something here, that we should just tell them that the site needs to be reflagged.
All right. So I think instead of putting those, we'll state in review of wetland flags, they do not seem to encompass at least the latest round of delineation review. Flags should be reestablished and reviewed again in the field for compliance.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, this sort of got appealed and whatnot back in 2018, right?
Yeah, we denied
And
it. Yep.
Yeah, and the flags were done prior to that. Right.
We,
If I look at my calendar, it's going to be 2024 in January.
yep. Yeah, they definitely, and there was still some places that we went back and forth in 2018 too. So that's
Yeah.
something that we would 100% do. You know, if not during the 40B process, during the notice of intent process. So it's, I mean, it's within their benefit to do it now versus later, you know, to try and get their engineering done. So, all right. All right, so I'll make those changes as we discussed. You know, this is kind of some just administrative, you know, it was just a lot of things that we know that they have in terms of features. You know, it didn't have the existing infrastructure, the existing paths, etc. That's outlined in the ZBA's regulations. I noted that the stormwater bylaw is now in the general bylaws, chapter 154, since they requested a waiver. And you know, it doesn't appear that they kind of submitted an analysis that with the most applicable zoning district regulations, you know, which can include the wetland bylaw and stormwater bylaw. So we would want to understand the differences of how they could or could not comply with those. So it also states that shall avoid impacts to the extent possible in environmental sensitive areas. There is a section of the road that appears, you know, it extends past the wastewater treatment plant and has a turnaround, but that extension goes right between two wetlands within the 20-foot buffer zone, where there appears to at least be sufficient upland area outside of the 20-foot buffer zone where they could place this turnaround that wouldn't impact those buffer zones. So requesting that the ZBA have the applicant look at that, you know, and seeing if there's any tweaks to the roadway that could make it outside of the 20-foot, and kind of those types of comments where it looks like there might be some area in upland or at least farther away from our 20-foot no touch, in a determination of why the applicant couldn't utilize those areas. I did call out that the comprehensive regulations do state that the plan shall conform with the town stormwater bylaw and the standards for the 100-year storm. The applicant has stated that they do not need to conform to the stormwater bylaw. So kind of recommending that the requirements be upheld, because compliance with the bylaw ensures that future residents and or owners are equitably equipped with necessary infrastructure to handle changes in storms frequencies and intensity associated with climate change. You know, I think this is kind of pretty important because a lot, you know, of these waivers would have a negative long-term impact on the property and the owners, especially because these are going to be owner occupied. So, you know, making sure that it does meet those, because things, you know, might be, not to say worse, but higher frequency and higher intensity in the future, and they should adequately prepare for that. And just requesting that Concom be informed during the construction process, you know, asking that they do have a peer reviewer or a consulting engineer during construction to help assist with town departments. There didn't seem to be adequate erosion controls through the projects, so they seem to just put erosion controls where the work extended within the buffer zone. But in reality, there should be erosion controls throughout the entirety of the project. The way that they have them now with the slopes, just the general topography of the site, there's a high chance and likelihood that upland areas, sedimentation from upland areas would affect wetland resource areas and or abutters, you know, which is a problem under our stormwater bylaw. So we're suggesting that they be placed along the limit of work. And then because of such a large area, suggesting that a construction phasing plan be submitted to ensure kind of pre and during construction requirements. This is pretty common of sites of this size. This can be kind of just general phasing, or having them do kind of a phasing with a checkpoint that they have to meet before they're allowed to go to the next phase of the project. Um, on some plans, it says a 25-foot no touch. On some plans, it says a 20-foot no touch. So consistency would be nice. Asking for a construction entrance on all access points. They only kind of had it on one when there's more than one point of access. And then some of the details just call for on steep slopes, erosion control blankets shall be used. So requesting that that be outlined where exactly they're going to be used. Then the drainage report, they stated there's 23 test pits, but look, they're not all labeled on the plans, and looking at the soil logs, it doesn't appear that they are within the areas that a lot of the stormwater facilities are going to be going. They're stating that the test pits were more than 100 feet away from wetlands when some of the stormwater structures are much closer to that. And then cut and fill calculations as required. They didn't submit a SWIP, so submitting a SWIP beforehand as it would be required during the notice of intent. Kind of outlining some deficiencies in the operation maintenance plan. You know, they were using stormwater basins as construction basins, so ensuring those get cleaned out at the end. The standards of keeping them for 10 years, the records for maintenance, you know, and just kind of making sure that things are consistent with what's required under the EPA for a SWIP. And then some of the infiltration BMPs appear to be closer than 50 feet away from surface water. So that's kind of an issue that would hold up in the notice of intent as well. And then the project is a land use with higher potential pollutant loads. So there's kind of certain criteria under the Wetlands Protection Act that they need to meet for that criteria as well. So just calling that out. That was a very wordy explanation of my 25 comments, but I didn't know if there was anything else, any changes besides taking out some of those wetland flags, you know, and this comes with the caveat that this is just kind of a preliminary review. I was going to call out again, like I did in the preliminary letter, the previous issues that we had denied the project for utilizing wetland resources for stormwater, and, you know, not meeting those performance standards. That's all I got.
Do you think you have to specifically call out why it was denied before?
It was something we talked about at the last meeting, just stating, you know, the applicant should ensure that, you know, they are meeting the standards and, you know, the reasons, my brain isn't working. The applicant should ensure that they are not utilizing performance standards that have been proven to not be acceptable, essentially. That didn't come out right. Let me see what I wrote.
Well, so they didn't meet certain performance standards of the Wetlands Protection Act.
Mm-hmm.
Should we just state that, you know, the applicant should make sure they're meeting the requirements, the performance requirements of that section of the act that they didn't meet before?
Yeah, we can definitely, that's probably a much cleaner way.
Just to put it on the act itself, and not
Yeah.
anything that we wrote in a denial or anything.
Yep.
I guess not to be cynical, we did deny it for that reason, and I believe we were in the right to do so. Their appeal to the DEP was never resolved, right?
Correct.
Right.
And I guess I would just say it wouldn't surprise me if we go down that road again. That we are presented with a plan that, for the same reason, doesn't comply with the Wetlands Protection Act, that they believe that it does, and it gets appealed again. I just sort of, I feel that coming down the road.
Rinse and repeat.
Yep.
Yeah, which is why why I thought about specifically calling out the performance standard
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I
Just
think
call
what
that
I
out
did
that,
in
you know-
my, oh, sorry. What I did in my preliminary letter was just kind of applicant should review their compliance with stormwater standards and handbook in compliance with the Wetlands Protection Act to ensure that wetland resources are not being utilized to meet the standards. You know, we can put as a reason for denial, you know, in a previous notice of intent.
I don't think I'd put that in there. You know, because it didn't get resolved from DEP, right? I would just say that, you know, we would expect them to meet the performance standards of the Wetlands Protection Act. Right,
Well-
as DEP should.
Right.
But since they didn't actually come back and specifically uphold that point within a decision that they made, you know, I don't know, that's a limb I want to go way out of the end on.
But Melissa, I do agree with you mentioning that it's with respect to, you know, treating stormwater within wetland resource areas, you know.
Well, that's fine, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, so
What-
just
what-
take out the denial.
Just wondering if that was the biggest issue in the past, should it be towards the front of this document that this is an expectation we have?
Yeah, I think,
It's not a bad idea. I mean, it was the
Once-
issue ultimately.
and I think once we decide on comments, what I was gonna do is kind of go back and format them to have just like administrative comments, engineering comments, you know, et cetera. So that can definitely be moved to the forefront. Because it's a little jumbled right now. It goes a little everywhere.
When does this have to be completed and sent in?
I would say there's not necessarily
Can I
a
see a November date?
timeline. Laura, when's your next CBA meeting? I'm sorry if you're there. She might not be. That's okay. I think there is a meeting in November on this, but I think the next meeting is just regarding traffic. So we do have some additional time
Okay,
if needed.
all right, well, certainly if you want to edit it, format it, we should take another look at it after that to put our stamp of approval on it.
November 29th. She's sorry, she couldn't unmute herself. Is the next meeting. So yes, we do
Well, I
have
saw our
one.
microphone go white, but nothing happened.
Yeah, yeah. Just I don't know what happened. So we would have one more meeting before the 29th. So I can reformat, take some of the comments from tonight, and if there's anything else that you guys have you would like me to include, just feel free to send them directly to me, and then I will update that list for everyone.
Okay,
And again, that 29th meeting is just about traffic. So worst case scenario, we do have more time.
all right. You see, you have a couple updates?
Yes, very quickly. For the first time in a while, I shut down a site today. It was very exciting. 10 Overlook Drive, we did an order of conditions recently for the replacement of a septic. So they had gotten started without recording their permit, without putting a sign up, no pre-construction meeting, no erosion controls, no nothing. It was pretty good. So I did have them stop, remove equipment. I think I did allow them, or they were just going to pump out the existing tank, you know, since that didn't require any excavation, but they were going a little gung ho. So they now know their requirements. So that's put on hold for a little bit until they get their things in line. So I'll keep you posted on that. I'll keep an eye on what's going on there. And then for Breakneck Hill, we are finally releasing the bid on the 1st. So I haven't sent it out to you guys just to kind of be consistent, to ensure that, you know, not that I think you'd send it out to people, but just to follow those proper protocols. So on the 1st, I'll send it to you in stewardship. And we're hopeful the bids will be due by November 15th. So I did have Liz Leiden, our town council, who's been working on this, reach out to DEP this week, and we're awaiting a response because our initial deadline to start work is the end of November. So we ran into some issues figuring out procurement with the state. Even the state was kind of baffled of where this fell, and then getting the specs from TRC took a little bit. So we're a little bit farther behind than we wanted, but if the weather holds out, we're hopeful we can get something started this winter. If not, we requested to late April, early May, just in case we do have a very harsh winter and we can't get anything done. So it gives us a little bit of extra time. So I'll keep you updated on that, but we are rocking and rolling. So hopefully we get some good bids and, select board can choose a contractor soon after bids close on the 15th.
And Melissa, you said town council reviewed the bid documents.
Yes.
Okay, and it's clearly right up front that it's a prevailing wage job.
Yep.
Awesome. We had a little snafu with that here in town not too long ago that was problematic.
Yeah, and that's where we got caught up on the procurement because there are portions of the project that can be exempt. But we went the safe route and said, everything complies. So prevailing wage and all of that
Perfect.
fun business. That's all I got.
All right. Anybody else have anything else? Or you have all your costumes ready for Tuesday? All right, then, nothing else, then we can call the meeting a night and look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second,
Second?
all in favor?
Barrington,
Yes.
Upton,
That's
Smith,
Yes.
Bosmato.
Yes.
Right. Have a good night, everyone.
All right, everybody.
Thank
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, everyone.